Miss Evans, a junior school teacher, starts to feel worried about one of her new students as she observes the girl consistently wearing dirty clothes to school and rarely engaging with others. To understand more about the situation, Miss Evans decides to follow the student home one day, leading her to an unexpected and startling revelation. Before we dive into this story, take a moment to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel. Be sure to hit that notification bell as well, because we have more interesting stories on the way. Miss Evans warmly introduced a new addition to her class for the semester. As the class greeted Katie, the young girl visibly shrank in her seat, growing even more uneasy when some of her classmates inquired about her background and reasons for joining the school. Miss Evans, aware of the sad circumstances that led to Katie's mid-year enrollment, felt a pang of sympathy as she perused the transfer papers. Quickly diverting the attention away from the probing questions, Miss Evans reassured the class. "I'm sure we'll all get to know Katie better over time. Right now, it's time for math, though." The collective groan from the class signaled a shift to their academic tasks. Katie remained notably reserved, keeping her head down to obscure her face with dark hair. Sensing the girl's discomfort, Miss Evans crouched down beside her desk. "Hi, Katie. I just want to let you know that I'm always available if you need to talk. Changing schools is hard, but I'm sure you'll get settled in soon," Miss Evans comforted. Glancing at her, Katie's sad brown eyes met Miss Evans' gaze. "Thank you, miss," Katie whispered, prompting Miss Evans to place a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder before continuing with the day's lesson. As the day concluded, Miss Evans waited outside with Katie to meet her father. A man approached them, offering a warm greeting to Katie. "Hi, Katie. Did you have a good day at school?" Acknowledging with a nod, Katie left Miss Evans' side to join her father. Seizing the moment, Miss Evans extended her hand for a handshake, introducing herself. "You must be Katie's dad. I'm her teacher, Miss Evans. Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you too, miss. I'm Steve," Katie's dad replied, smiling as he shook her hand. Addressing Katie, he suggested, "Why don't you go wait in the car, sweetie? I'm sure you'd like to put that heavy backpack down, and I want a minute to talk to Miss Evans." Katie gave her dad a strange look before running off to an old pickup nearby. Steve shared with Miss Evans the challenges Katie had faced in recent months. "Katie's had it rough lately," he expressed. "I'd appreciate it if you could keep an eye on her." Miss Evans emphatically responded, acknowledging the recent loss of Katie's mother. Inquiring about Katie's adjustment, Miss Evans asked, "How has she been adapting?" "Some days are better than others. I didn't see her and Sean as often as I wanted since I moved up here for work," Steve explained. Optimistic about the future, he added, "I reckon things will go better once we're used to each other again." Miss Evans offered reassurance. "I'm sure they will." Smiling, she continued, "And don't worry, I'll do everything I can to help Katie settle in. She earned good grades at her previous school, and I look forward to seeing her get back on track." True to her promise, Miss Evans closely monitored Katie over the ensuing weeks, becoming increasingly concerned about what she observed. The girl consistently wore the same dusty and stained clothes to school, maintaining a quiet demeanor in class. On the playground, Katie opted to sit alone, disregarding attempts by other children to include her in their activities. Despite Miss Evans' attempts to coax her out of her shell, Katie remained withdrawn until the day she urgently sought Miss Evans' help. After a lively class session, while other students chatted loudly on their way out, Katie approached Miss Evans' desk. Standing there with her head down and arms tightly crossed, Miss Evans inquired, "Is everything okay, Katie?" The girl shook her head, mumbling words that were incomprehensible to Miss Evans. Encouragingly, Miss Evans urged, "Speak up, sweetie. I can't hear you." Expressing her distress, Katie shouted, "I don't want to leave school!" Lifting her head, she stared at Miss Evans with tearful eyes and pleaded, "Please, can I live with you instead?" Miss Evans' heart broke at the desperation in Katie's voice. Drawing closer, she placed a comforting hand on the girl's shoulder and asked, "Why don't you want to go home with your dad, Katie? Is something wrong?" Hugging herself and averting her gaze, Katie confided, "I don't like living with my dad. I don't want to stay with him anymore." Understanding the difficulty of adjusting to a new town and school, Miss Evans emphatically responded, "Oh, sweetie, I know it must be tough. You've been through so much, and I'm sure you miss the life you used to have." "I miss my mom and my room," Katie softly admitted, revealing the depth of her emotional struggle. At that moment, Steve appeared at the door, his muscular frame blocking it. "There you are. I was worried when I didn't see you outside," he expressed. Katie, in response, spun around and retreated from her father, firmly stating, "I'm not going with you." Steve's face visibly crumpled at Katie's words, and he pleaded, "Come on, Kitty, don't be like that." Katie's lip trembled, tears streaming down her dusty cheeks as she gazed at her dad. Crouching down in front of his daughter, Steve earnestly shared, "You know I'm trying real hard to be a good dad. Times are tough now, but everything will turn around someday. You'll see." He extended his hand to Katie, who, after a contemplative moment, dried her eyes and shuffled towards him. Miss Evans, unsure of the dynamics at play, observed the situation, recognizing that Katie was clearly unhappy living with her dad, but suspecting there might be more to her distress. "Let's all walk out together," Miss Evans suggested, offering her hand to Katie. As they reached the parking lot, Katie pulled away from the adults and ran ahead to her dad's pickup. Steve apologized to Miss Evans, acknowledging Katie's recent stress and struggles. Miss Evans, expressing concern, mentioned, "I've noticed she sometimes comes to school in dirty clothes. Is everything okay at home?" Steve, widening his eyes and rubbing his beard, responded, "Yeah, we've had some problems with the plumbing. I swear I've reported it to the landlord, but nobody's come to fix it yet." While walking towards his car, Steve suddenly stopped and admitted, "I really appreciate you looking out for Katie, but I think it's still going to be a while before she gets used to all the changes in her life." Saying goodbye, Steve climbed into his pickup, which emitted an unpleasant plume of smoke as he drove away. Despite Steve's reassurances, Miss Evans continued to worry about Katie. Although she was no longer coming to school in dirty clothes, she had developed a pattern of being tardy and occasionally skipping classes. One day, Miss Evans noticed that Katie looked pale, with dark circles under her eyes, and struggled to stay awake in class. Concerned, Miss Evans decided to investigate further. She assigned the class some work to keep them occupied and stepped out to call Steve. "Hello, Steve. This is Katie's teacher, Miss Evans. I've noticed that Katie often seems exhausted at school," she mentioned. Steve explained, "That's because we've had to stay up late to work on her homework. I've been working late too, which is why I can't help her earlier. Her work is much tougher than what I remember doing at her age." Suggesting a solution, Miss Evans said, "Well, if Kitty's struggling so much, it might be better to get her a tutor. I'll write down some numbers and give them to Katie so she can pass them on to you." Steve expressed his gratitude, and Miss Evans continued with her plan. Later that day, as Miss Evans was locking up the classroom, she noticed a crumpled note on the floor near Katie's desk. Picking it up, she discovered it was the note with the math tutor's numbers. Confused, she wondered why Katie would discard it if she was having difficulty with schoolwork. Glancing out the window, she saw Steve and Kitty leaving the school grounds on foot. Steve carried Katie's backpack while holding her hand, and Katie had her head bowed. Something felt wrong, and Miss Evans was determined to find out what it was. Hurrying to her car, she intended to follow Katie and her father, but they had disappeared by the time she reached the street. The following day, Miss Evans waited as Steve arrived to pick up Katie, and once again, they left on foot. Curious and concerned, Miss Evans decided to follow them. Father and daughter walked several miles before reaching the old pickup, parked on an empty lawn near the town's edge. Steve opened the car, placed Kitty's backpack inside, and then covered the windows. Mystified, Miss Evans watched as Kitty emerged in different clothes, carrying the ones she wore to school. They headed to a nearby laundromat. Crossing the road, Miss Evans peeked through a gap in the sheets covering the windows and was surprised by what she saw. Realizing this situation couldn't continue, Miss Evans took out her phone and called the police. As they arrived, Kitty, noticing Miss Evans, ran towards her, followed by a shocked Steve. The police soon arrived and inspected Steve's car, noting folded piles of clothes, pillows, blankets, and a teddy bear on the dash, revealing that Steve and Kitty were living in the pickup. "It's only temporary," Steve explained to the police. "I lost my job due to a factory injury, but I'll get a new one soon, and we won't be homeless anymore." Katie tearfully added, "I don't mind it so much. My daddy brought my pillows and Freckles my teddy, so I can be happy, and I am, I promise. Please don't take my daddy away from me." The police reassured Katie, acknowledging the need for a change. Recognizing the urgency, the police officer turned to Steve, proposing to take them to a shelter for warmth and safety. Despite initial resistance, Steve and Kitty went to the shelter, and Steve later entered a rehabilitation center for his work injury. Meanwhile, Miss Evans took proactive steps, arranging a special meeting for parents at the school to explain the situation. In a heartwarming turn of events, the school organized a fundraiser for Steve and Katie. They raised enough money to rent a modest apartment and donated necessary furniture and appliances. Over time, Kitty transformed from a quiet and withdrawn child to a perpetually smiling top student. Her remarkable journey led to a full scholarship for college. We're sure you enjoyed the story. Don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to our channel if you have yet to do so. Be sure to also hit that notification bell if you don't want to miss out on our upcoming stories.